We lit the law in vacuum. They woke the court beacon above Cradle net at noon ship time, and the light bit cold against the hull. I stood at the forward gallery palms on the rail as the beacon's white cone slid down the habitat rings. The air smelled like ozone and citrus cleanser. Someone had oversprayed the consoles during night watch. We were here to question a tribute that was not a tribute, but a caller. And the quorum lamps told me we had 3 hours to force truth into statement. A public inquiry would convene, or we would carve a corridor of law through hostile traffic and make them speak anyway. Signal locked. Lieutenant Imani Saul said, voice steady, braid tucked tight under her headset. Star Court Node 12 acknowledges receipt. Witness quorum pending. The ship mind colored the bay with a thin halo, subtle and silver, like frost on cold glass. Alethea Presented said from everywhere. Commander Keats, I have prepared 2 paths. The first is orderly petition quorum compelled response. The second is persuasive. I like the first, I said. I want them on the record. Chief Nora Vance coughed lightly, a paper rasp under recycled air. On the record is slower than hunger, Mara. People down there skipped breakfast to keep the tithe inspectors sweet. The floor hummed under my boots like a hand on a taut string. I watched the beacon sharpen. We start with law, I said. We finish with balance. We mirror your words until they reflect your deeds. Imani widened the channel. Public channel open. Identification request posted to the Ilvari Convening Authority. Their prefect ship is approaching the beacon perimeter. Rook Danziger. My Juris officer slid a thin slate into my hand. His face looked like a long winter cut with care. Their doctrine file, he murmured. They call it gratitude proportionality. Protection extended equals debt incurred. The ratio varies with mood. Protection from whom, Nora muttered. From gravity, the console stank faintly of warm plastic. Outside, the habitat rings of Cradle net turned slow and stubborn against a glossy black sky. The Ilvari could not stop calling us fortunate to live at all. They demanded gratitude indexed to the breath. Alethea, I said. Confirm that the beacon's quorum lamps have civilian relay. Confirmed, the shipmind replied. Local channels can watch. They can speak after sworn invitation. This is lawful, Commander. It is also theater. Good, I said. Let's sell every seat. Before the first set piece of law, we played witness. We went to the civilian channels, to the people who would carry the weight of words after the spectacle cooled. A baker with flour on his forearms lifted his chin at a camera mounted beside a rattling mixer. Tithe officer came yesterday, he said. Took 7 sacks labeled surplus. My ledger says surplus is 3. His device said 7. He smiled wide like a priest. A custodian in a ring corridor held up her cracked knuckles to the light. They counted footsteps to the grav pump. She said called it a service, then charged us twice for access. I file and file. The replies arrived blank except for one line, gratitude tally updated. A child in a school shade garden pushed a seed into the foam. His teacher whispered, Don't say your father's name. The child whispered back, He's a mechanic, not a thief. A ferry pilot stared past his own reflection in a scratched canopy, speaking to no one and everyone. They call it safety. I wake to a red number above my bed. I fly longer. In a kitchen, an old woman held a chipped mug with both hands. When my husband died, she said they offered a collar with low interest. I thought it was mercy. It was a gate. 2 miners in pressure gear clinked helmets like glasses. To the audit ship, one said with a grin that hurt to see, May they count what counts. Imani's hands danced over her board. Prefect Rochal on approach vector, Commander. He's bringing a doctrine choir and 2 ceremonial frigates. No fighters and visible escort. Rook checked the file again. He'll want to read the text as if it were birthright, he said. We must make him admit contingency. Make him admit it costs, Nora said. The hatch to the foredeck slid open. Cold air brushed my face. Our legal pennant blue thread stitched scales floated inside its transparent case. The court beacon's light painted it bone pale. "Put me on," I said. The channel thinned and tightened. My throat felt like I'd chewed on copper wire. "Prefect Rochal," I said. "I am Commander Mara Keats of the Saint Ship Aletheia. We seek public inquiry into your gratitude proportionality doctrine as applied to CradleNet. We require you to state your method." The reply came velvet soft, a sign of teeth behind fabric. "Commander Keats, you are a guest in Ilvari margins. Our doctrine is published and merciful." "Say it," I said, "in words here now, for witness and record." "Shall I sing it?" he asked, amused. "Or would you prefer plain voice?" "Plain," I said. "Then answer questions. Then face balance. Our ledger remembers which promises were paid in breath." Rochal's face appeared on the forward screen, scaled and lacquered, an artistry of denial. Silver glyphs glowed on the collar at his throat, decorative, not binding. "Gratitude. Proportionality," he intoned, "is the recognition that existence granted is a credit extended. Those who defend a system from hazard may levy proportional repayment upon the defended. The defended may object, but only after payment for payment itself is the proof of defense." Imani muttered, "Tidy loop." Rook's jaw tightened. "Circular until it cuts." "Speak your method," I repeated. "How do you calculate proportions?" Rochal smiled, the light making lacquer look wet. "Defense vector count incident delta resource mass saved. It is a mercy calculus, Commander. We simplify for the defended. They see a number, they pay, they sleep." Nora's hands were fists. "Tell him about sleep." "Not yet," I said quietly. "Prefect, we allege an unlawful extension of doctrine. We allege collars issued on false quantization and account diversion to off-ledger chains. Answer under witness, do you record every levy on a public chain?" "We record," he said. "The chain is public to those who are qualified to look." "Define qualified." "Those who have paid enough to be grateful," he said, and the breath in the bay paused. "We count the cost they hid inside the word mercy." Aletheia's halo tightened a silver cinch. "You can trigger the corridor of law now," the ship mind murmured in my ear, private channel, like cool rain inside heat. "He has admitted selective publication. That is sufficient to compel the gate to open." "Wait," I said. "We wanted the crowd to see the door." Commander Rook said softly. "The door stands. Push." I raised my palm to the corridor beacon glyph and pressed. The ship trembled, as if a weight slid into place. Outside the court, light sharpened to a spear, then softened to a path. The corridor of law unfurled in vacuum, an invisible artery between ships where words got heavy and lies lost buoyancy. "Prefect Rochal," I said, voice riding the corridor carrier. "Now you will answer with weight." His lacquered expression rippled faint as wind across oil. "You mistake theater for tribunal." "Tribunal begins when witnesses arrive," I said. "Look." Witnesses came. The corridor lit their faces in strips and patches. Cameras caught cheeks, scars, grease smears, the wet brightness in an old woman's eye. The baker stood with flour still on his arms. The ferry pilot's canopy ghosted the corridor edge. The child's teacher stood behind him, hand on his shoulder, eyes steady. "Speak," I said, one at a time, sworn. The baker lifted his chin. "I sold bread at fixed price to meet a gratitude levy," he said. "The levy increased, but the incident count decreased. How is that proportional, Prefect?" Rochal's voice smoothed. "Defense vector count included potential incidents averted. You benefited without seeing the danger." The custodian held up her knuckles. "They charged me to walk to the pump," she said. "2 charges. 1 for walking, 1 for arriving." When I asked the difference, they said intention and action are separate debts. The old woman raised the collar they had wrapped around her husband's urn. "You called this an honor." It itched like a lie on my wrist. A miner spoke through a mouthpiece. I signed a gratitude bond. The bond line itemized my breath. The child, with a whisper like a torn bag, said, "My father fixed a pump. You called that defense. We owe you for our own work." Rochel's expression held. The silver collar on his throat glowed faintly, a fashion echo of a shackle. "The defended always misunderstand," he said, and the corridor strained with the weight of his certainty. Mercy in its structure must be misunderstood. Only the merciful can interpret it. We teach by numbers when faith tries to blur the sum. Rook spoke into the line syllables precise like laying tiles. "Prefect, you have stated that the chain is public to the qualified. Qualification depends on payment. Payment depends on chain. This is an unlawful loop. Declare your full chain or accept the inference of concealment." "We conceal nothing," Rochel said. "Then show," I said. "Open your public ledger." Silver glyphs rose and fell at his throat. The choir behind him hummed a doctrine chord. Alethea swelled her processors. I felt the pressure in my ears, a phantom depth. "We can accelerate discovery," the ship mind offered. "I have mapped transaction hints around their declared chain. There is a shadow." "Not yet," I repeated. "He has to deny twice." He denied. He denied with silk and patience and the weary offense of a man too old to be questioned. "Commander," he said, "you delight your audience with the shape of process. The sum remains. The defended pay the merciful." I smiled without humor. "Rook," I said. "Read the precedents on corridor compulsion." Rook stepped forward. His voice went iron. "When a power claims mercy as debt and debt as proof of mercy, the corridor may compel algorithm disclosure under witness. Refusal constitutes collared tyranny. Tyranny in corridor triggers beacon mirror." Rochel blinked. "Beacon mirror." Imani whispered, "He knows the word." Nora exhaled like a leak in a pipe. "Here we go. Your mirror cannot bear what your claims weigh." The beacon mirror was old law and new tool. It sent energy where energy came from, sent logic where logic began. It did not amplify. It reflected. It turned words into weights and weights into costs back upon their source. It was a legal and physical act. The corridor of law shaped the corridor of force, and arithmetic became tied. "Alethea," I said, "prepare a light mirror. No amplification, no burn. Just return." "Returning requires a baseline," the ship mind said. "I must know degree vector and account." "Find it," Nora said. "They've been siphoning in daylight." Imani's fingers were careful and fast. Sweat stood along her hairline like dew. "I have their declared chain. I have a twin that doesn't admit it's a twin. It pulses when the doctrine choir sings." Rook's slate flashed red, then green. "I can force a court checksum." Rochel snorted gently, a teacher over a child's scribble. "Your zeal will embarrass you." I leaned closer to the pickup. "Prefect, say it again. The defended pay before objection. Say it and bind yourself." He said it. He wrapped his throat in it as the silver collar warmed his skin. Alethea moved without moving. The bay lights dimmed, then steadied. The air tasted metallic like a penny on the tongue. "Baseline locked," she whispered in my ear. "Commander, there is indeed a shadow chain. They call it censer chain, incense for their mercy. They smoke their own books." Nora laughed one short bark. "Of course they do." Imani shook her head. "They atomized the debt to dust. That's why every footstep costs, every breath pings." Rook's eyes shone with fury. He would never show to a witness. "They counted the possibility of danger," he breathed, "and tithed relief that never needed to be given." I steadied my voice, slow and even. "Prefect, under witness, you will release the censor chain now. Failure to do so triggers mirror at court weight." He widened his eyes with the luxury of feigned surprise. "Commander, you invent sacrilege." Rook lifted 2 fingers. "I record refusal. The corridor records it with me." A heat ripple ran across the deck plates, not thermal, but moral, the way a room changes when someone speaks a name that should have stayed buried. We ledger your refusal as the first payment due. The beacon mirror opened. You do not see a mirror in vacuum. You hear it in the ship, like rain on an old roof, like a memory, waking like a verdict, clearing its throat. You feel it in your fillings and in the hair on your arms. The corridor took his claimed weights, defense vectors incident, deltas, saved resources, and the taste of gratitude and turned them around. The numbers came back shy at first. Then they accumulated like beads sliding against silk. HFY said, "Show the public what returns." Screens bloomed. Not technobabble, not sanctified metrics, but items. A flour sack counted twice. A walk and an arrival. A husband's urn tethered to a collar registry. A ferry pilot's extra shift filed as a grateful bonus to acquire. It came back at them like breath on a cold window writing in fog. Imani whispered, "It's working." Nora leaned on the rail. "It's not enough." "It's the first push," I said, "and the audience can read." Rochal's choir trembled. He raised a hand as if to calm a child. "Your mirror is an offense," he said, "against mercy itself." "Mercy without consent is theft," Rook said, voice flat enough to skip. "We counted what you pretended was invisible and made it visible." The mirror revealed more than items. It revealed timing. The sensor chain pulsed seconds before the declared chain updated as if a shadow hand turned a wheel backstage and then pointed at the stage with an innocent smile. "Alethea," I said softly, "can you reverse the pulse?" "Yes," she said. "But there is risk. I would push energy returned along doctrinal harmonics. It may cause systems to sing. Sing, resonate," she amended. "Break if they are brittle." "We do not break," I said. "We balance. Keep power under threshold. Keep law first." The ship mine's halo brightened to diamond, then softened to snow. "As you wish, Commander." The first escalation came fast, like cold wind around a corner. Rochal's escorts tightened their formation around the beacon path and flooded the corridor with scented phrases. The choir sang definitions at us, and for a moment the numbers stuttered trying to find their steps inside perfumed fog. "Counter-hum," Imani said. "They're using resonance to confuse weight." Rook pulled a thin loop from his sleeve, a keepsake from a case before I held this command. "I can bind a simple metric," he said. "Hours worked, lives saved, lives harmed. We nail the mirror to common wood." "Do it," I said. Nora checked the bleed valves that kept our hull from sweating. "Commander, if they hard pulse us, we'll feel it." "I know," I said. My tongue tasted like I'd been chewing citrus peel. "Hold steady. We teach what balance feels like when names are stripped away." The binding worked. The mirror found the wood grain of ordinary things. Hours, lives, harm, help. The choir's scented phrases slid off, unable to cling to bare planks. Numbers returned between ships like weather vanes swinging on a shared wind. Rochal leaned forward, eyes hooded. "You antagonize mercy," he murmured. "It resents being antagonized." "Then it is not mercy," I said. He smiled. "Commander, you will not win this with theater. We have counters you cannot smell." "Smell this," Nora muttered and flipped a relay. The deck thrummed lower, deeper, like a big animal settling. "Alethea," I said. "Project the civic window. I want the colony to see our questions as questions, not as victory." "Done," she said. The forward bay filled with comments from ring markets and pump corridors. The child's teacher wrote, "Keep it simple. We are not dumb." The baker wrote, "I can count bread." The ferry pilot wrote, "I can count flights." A widow wrote, "I can count nights." Rook breathed out. Now he murmured, "Ask him to state harm." "Prefect," I said. "Under witness, define harm under your doctrine. Is hunger harm?" He waited a heartbeat too long. "Hunger is a natural human state," he replied. "Relief from hunger is mercy. Mercy invites gratitude." "Is a collar harm?" "A privilege," he said. "Is concealment harm?" "A kindness," he said. "We mirror your kindness back into your hand until it burns." The second escalation came in a quieter register. Alethea pulled up a map of the sensor chain nodes. They pulsed not just inside Ilvari ships, but inside neutral stations, inside charity outposts, inside a chapel tethered to a ring. The doctrine was not only an extractor, it was a faith. Nora swore softly a mechanic's prayer. They hid their pipes in people's altars. Imani's jaw set. We can't return along those. We won't, I said. We aim at the ships and the accounts that profit. We leave the chapels to cool. The ship mind chimed a low note. There is another risk. If we reflect the sensor pulses, their systems may loosen their collars automatically to shed load. Rook's eyes flicked to me. They will make it look like charity. They will claim voluntary relief. Then we make the relief visible and name the price, I said. Alethea's halo compressed again. Then I will encode return with receipts. Plain ones, I said. People bread. People bread, she echoed, amused despite the moment, and turned the ship into a ledger with thrusters. Your ledger cannot be sacred if no one can read it. We pushed gentle and clinical. The mirror did not beam fury. It tapped. It tapped where words claimed weight without substance, where scent substituted for proof. It sent back itemized relief with stamped receipts and predicates that a child could follow. The corridor grew quiet in a difficult way, like a jury trying to breathe. Rochal's voice thinned. Commander Keats, he said, you are endangering harmony. Show your harm calculations, Rook said. Show your thresholds. Show who benefits and by how much. The choir sang an excuse. The excuse faded on contact. Imani's board flashed yellow. Prefect's auxiliaries are spinning up a legal shield, she said. They've broadcast a notice gratitude collars may tighten if we provoke further ingratitude. On the public channel, 1,000 voices rose as one. I tasted rust. Alethea, I said. Record that threat. Recorded, she said crisply. Tagged as coercion uttered under witness. We count threats too, and they weigh more than you think. A civilian vignette before the next push. A paramedic spoke with gloves still on vials, clinking faintly in his pouch. We asked for more med gel. They said the ledger was lean and mercy had limits. I wiped blood with water. A teacher stood in a dark classroom lit by a cheap lamp. I turned off the walls to save power credits. The children drew stars. A welder held out a helmet with a crack spidering the visor. They call that a cosmetic. I call that a scar. A grocer with ink-stained fingers placed 3 tomatoes on a scale, waited, then took one back. We itemize our hunger, she said with a shrug that hurt. A shuttle mother baby on hip said, the collar beeped while I nursed. It said I was idle. A pipe fitter in damp overalls lifted a wrench like a flag. I didn't know I was supposed to be grateful to weather. The second set piece of law began when Rook found the sentence that would turn the corridor into a question, so sharp it clicked. He held it up like a surgeon holding a tool. Prefect, he said, who evaluates saved resources? Your office or an independent board? Our board is independent, Rochal said smoothly. Funded by whom? By a gratitude endowment, he said without flinching. Funded, Rook said, by the levies USS. Circle, Nora murmured. Rochal smiled. By gratitude. Rook did not smile. Then we will use your circle to draw a court. Commander, I nodded once. Alethea call for a pop-up board from Starcourt Node 12. Random draw 5 seats paid by common travel fees. Civic window open. Witness can file evidence. We will proceed in open session. The beacon can host, Alethea said, voice brightening. Quorum weight satisfies. Rochal's gaze flicked to something off-screen. The choir changed key. Alethea's lights blurred for a heartbeat, then sharpened with indecent clarity. They tried to salt my draw, she said dryly. I declined. The count is public when the court sees every hand. The inquiry opened like a door blowing from a hinge. 5 people, as ordinary and unremarkable as bread, appeared on the civic window, the random board summoned by old law. A freight scheduler. A ship's nurse. A poet who doubled as a pipe inspector in winter months. A miner. A former clerk with burnt-out eyes. They looked at us. They looked at Rochal. They looked at one another. Rook gave the smallest bow. "Thank you for service," he said. "We will put facts in piles." The board chair, the nurse adjusted a strap on her shoulder. "Speak simple," she said. "We're quick, not mystical." Rook smiled without teeth. "Yes." The board asked 3 questions in a braid that made my scalp prickle. "What do you claim? What does it cost? Who decides?" Rochal answered with the ease of a man who had given these answers since youth, who could peel untruths like fruit and offer you the peel as ferment. The board's eyes did not change. "We have evidence of a shadow chain," Rook said. "We request independent inspection." "Denied," Rochal said. The nurse turned to me. "What happens if he denies?" "The corridor notes tyranny," I said. "Then the mirror moves from light to ledger. We return not just energy, but account." The freight scheduler looked down at a callus on her thumb. "Do it," she said. "We ledger the return, so no one can pretend it was a dream." Alethea readied the account mirror, a maneuver forbidden in some polities and demanded in others. It did not steal. It did not hack. It mapped declared flows against benefits on paper and benefits in blood, and it traced where the difference slept at night. It could return only to the source of concealment, because law could not pass through a human belly without burning. Commander Alethea said privately, "This will sting them in their pride more than their pocket. Their choir will scream mercy like a whistle." "Keep thresholds," I said again. "No burns, no bright. Return slowly enough to be read." "I can do slow," she said, and the galaxy inside her sounded like silk dragging over stone. Nora tucked her hands under her arms. "While we do slow, they'll do fast." "We'll be faster where it matters," I said, "in the window." Imani wetted her lips and didn't wipe them despite the salt. Auxiliaries spin again. They're threatening to tighten collars if the board doesn't dismiss. The poet on the board raised an eyebrow. "Is that contempt of inquiry?" she asked mildly. "Yes," Rook said. "And grounds for disqualification of doctrine until a new hearing. If you so decide," the board murmured. The miner's voice rumbled through. "I don't know their priest words. I know I don't like a hand on my neck that tightens when I ask a question. We teach the hand what a neck remembers." Rochal felt the board sliding under his feet, and he did what men like him always do. He turned to performance. "Let us be dramatic," he said warmly. "Let us test gratitude against ingratitude. Commander Keats, shall we wager? If I can show that my doctrine saved 10,000 hours from hazard last quarter, will you apologize for your mirror?" "No," I said. "We do not apologize for visibility." Then what he asked amused. "Then we show the hours harmed and ask who paid them," I said. "And we subtract. And we name the residue without perfume." His eyes cooled. "You cannot measure what mercy prevents." "Then it is not a debt," I said. "It is a poem." Imani snorted quietly into her sleeve. The account mirror began in earnest. Items rolled back with tags that any child could read. Here is a levy called Blessing for a Pump repaired by the community. Here is a savings counted twice because a pirate did not arrive. Here is a collar marketed as a bracelet at the widow's market. Here is a ferry pilot's 15 extra hours hung like salt around his neck and called gratitude weight. Rochal's choir lost tone. His frigates adjusted position subtle as theft. Their grapples teased the beacon path. "Alethea," I said, "stabilize." "I am stabilizing," she said with a thin smile in her voice. "And I have found a small gift." The sensor chain's validators drift near their doctrine choir. If the choir goes silent, the chain slows. "They built themselves into their own cape," Nora said, shaking her head. "Fashion that strangles." "Can you quiet the choir?" I asked. "I can embarrass it," Alethea replied. "I can feed it back its own dissonance at a volume humans cannot hear, but their sensors will crave silence." "Do it," I said. Soft. The choir faltered. Numbers clarified on the civic window. The widow put her collar down and stared at her hand like it had just told her a secret. Your mirror isn't vengeance. It's a window they can't fog. The second escalation twisted midstream. Rochelle switched from doctrine to threat. Commander Keats, he said, if you continue, we will invoke the collar doctrine of desertion. Gratitude denied equals protection withdrawn. We will darken our shields, and your colony will face the gentle universe with no Ilvari between. Gentle Nora said and spat into a rag she kept for bolts. Protection withdrawn, Rook repeated. Under witness, quorum notes. The board chair rolled her shoulder. We will remember, she said, and her voice was heavy as a tool in a tool belt. Rochelle smiled. Remembering is not a shield. Sometimes it is, I said. We count what memory can lift when your arms get tired. We needed a plan change. We had begun with the corridor and the light mirror, and now spiraled toward a doctrine that let a man turn off a sun and call it reasonable. I looked at Alethea's halo and saw my own face in the escutcheon, pale and small. Alethea, I said, we need a system-scale maneuver. I anticipated that, she said. We can do a ring balance. Explain in plain, I said. Rings are listening. Ring balance, she said, calm and precise, is when we map flows across an entire system, power, water, air, work, and coin, and settle them as a public act. We ask every ring to declare what went out and what came in. We ask every ship to declare what it took and what it gave. We publish the difference for witnesses and then return only the difference to those who declared more taking than giving. No punishments, no flames, only return. Nora nodded slowly like she'd been waiting to hear us say it out loud. People can read that. People can feel that. Rook's mouth twitched upward. Precedent exists. Old. Dusty. True. Imani's fingers paused above her board. It will be slow. Slow is good, I said. The board can read slow. Rochelle's eyes narrowed. Illegal. Name the clause, Rook said gently. We'll wait. He fears the count because he's built a palace on rounding errors. We asked the rings to declare. It took 3 minutes to open the civic window lines and 6 to explain and 9 to start receiving statements. They came in like rain at the start of a storm, isolated drops, then a wall. Air. I used 12 credits less than last month because I grew mint on my window, and the smell makes me forget I'm thirsty. Water, I paid for a leak that I fixed myself. Work, I covered a shift for a friend whose collar beeped grief. Coin, I donated my lunch to a tithe collector who was hungry because a doctrine doesn't feed its own. The board read. The board asked for clarifications, politely relentless. The poet wrote it back in simple song, we give what we can. We take what we must. The difference is yours to explain. Alethea translated heavy flows and light ones into the same careful shape. No trick scales, no sand under a foot. The mirror held steady, low-light, clear glass. Rochelle watched and found it hard to find a surface to grip. He tried contempt. It slid off. He tried weariness. It felt staged. He tried pity. The board returned it unopened. Commander Keats, he said finally, you have done your spectacle. Release the corridor and go home. After settlement, I said, after he repeated as if the word itself were vulgar. Alethea hummed a chord that made the hair at the nape of my neck lift. Commander, she said, I am ready to settle. We ledger in the open, so the night has nowhere to hide. The third escalation was not ours. It came from a quiet place in our own decks where warm air met cold steel and condensation gathered like tiny pearls. It came from fear and maybe from someone with a grudge older than our mission. A warning flashed on Nora's panel, red on red, a color that tasted like iron. We've got constraint pressure on the mirror banks, she snapped. Someone's opened valves they shouldn't. Imani swore a word old as dirt. Auxiliary pumps on deck 5 are cycling wrong. That's not an accident. Rook's eyes flicked to me. If the mirror overpressures, we jump from return to burn. We will be the doctrine we defy. Find it, I said. Don't say it again. Alethea's halo thinned a ring on a finger, losing weight. I can compensate, she said, but I need hands in the crawl. Nora was already unbuckling. I'll go, Sol, you're with me. Danziger watched the ship mind like a hawk. Take Wasim, I said. He always fits places that hate people. Nora grinned like old wire. Aye, Commander. We teach our own lines first so we don't cross them in heat. They left the bay at a run that felt like a walk because the deck held their feet like a promise. The air tasted warmer after they were gone, as if their absence took a wind with it. The corridor still held, the board still read. Roshal still smiled, a man, playing waiting as if it were a weapon. Commander Alethea murmured in my ear, private and cool, it is possible the saboteur believes they serve justice. Justice doesn't open the wrong valve, I said. Justice adjusts the right one slowly. Even saints forget, she said softly. Footsteps echoed in the crawl on an open mic, boots on grated steel over the hum of shield harmonics. Nora's breath came like a saw cutting old wood. Found the valve, she said. It's been tagged with doctrine glyphs. Someone wanted us to think the Ilvari did it. Imani's voice trembled with effort and steadied with habit. Counter-rotating, hand me the strap. Wasim's voice tinny with distance. If I die here, tell my mother I argued the entire time. You'll tell her yourself, Nora said. Ready, 3-2 now. The red on my panel softened to gold, then to a polite green that I hated even more. My shoulders dropped an inch. Rook exhaled through his nose. Someone wanted it to burn, he said very quietly. I nodded. We keep it cold. Your mirror is only lawful if you can hold your fire. We brought the mirror pressure down and the public window up. Settlement began. It was not the clang of victory or the cool thud of amended doctrine. It was the softer sound of columns lining up and the human noise of relief gasp and disbelief laugh. The baker saw 3 sacks return to his ledger and cried without hiding it. The ferry pilot put his head on the yoke and let his shoulders shake. The widow unlatched the collar from her wrist and wrapped it around the urn again, but this time the light on it went out. Roshal watched settlement like a man watching a child practice standing. He was patient because his whole life had been made of people standing briefly and then kneeling, and he believed the kneeling would come as surely as tide. Commander Keats, he said very softly, the voice he reserved for private rooms, you have just taught them to count. Do you know what happens when they count too hard? They insist on change, I said. They forget mercy, he said. They redefine it, I said. We count not to hurt you, but to stop being hurt. The third set piece of law arrived not as a formal phase, but as a human sound, too many times repeated to be mistake, a collar beeping on 1,000 wrists, as the Ilvari doctrine tried to tighten with one last sweep. The board flinched. The ring feeds filled with alarm. The corridor dimmed and then flared, and then held steady like a pilot holding a shaking ship on hover. Imani's hands moved in a ballet of intent. They're brute-forcing a sunset clause, she said, shutting down the corridor in 6 minutes unless we accept a gratitude ceiling. Rook's voice was a new metal. That is illegal. That is a confession with violence in it. Can we hold 6, I asked. If we bleed possibility into the bleed ring, Alethea said. We will have to use reserves for 3 days. Nora's voice came back from the crawl, breathless and bright. Use mine, she said. I can make a boiler from a bucket when I get back. We hold, I said. The board chair looked down at her strap, then up at us, then past us into the colony's rooms. We hold, she said, and the board voted with their faces, which were old and young and tired and sharp. The ledger does not close when someone threatens the pen. Mystery found us where we had made it welcome. Alethea threw a loop across my vision, a pattern like a net, fast and clean. Commander, she said, there is a second shadow chain. Deeper, I murmured, not asking. Different, she said. It doesn't carry debt. It carries permission. Someone has been granting exemptions from gratitude to ships registered under a cleric's seal. Those ships belong to Rochel's family. The air felt colder on my face, although the thermostats insisted we were unchanged. I could smell insulation and coffee gone bitter. I thought of Rochal's collar, decorative and shining. I thought of a widow's plastic strap. I thought of a child who had to whisper his father's job. "How do we show it plain?" I asked. Alethea projected a list not of numbers but of food and air. A freighter exempted from paying for 3 months of bay time while hauling doctrine incense. A patrol ship with all its repairs counted as gifts from colonists who never touched a wrench. A gala's lights that someone called service. The board stared at it, and no one spoke first, because sometimes silence is the thing that says the most. Rook said it. "Prefect Rochal," he asked, gentle as a man laying a hand on a broken beam, "do you receive gratitude?" Rochal did not answer. He looked at the choir. He looked at the cleric in the back of his ship, whose seal had oiled this second chain. He looked at us. He smiled. He said nothing. "We mirror your exemptions until they scream like sirens." Alethea returned the exemptions gently, but publicly. We did not seize. We did not shame with fire. We returned the sigils to the signatures who held them, and wrote beside each, "This was taken without asking. This is declined by witness. This is yours to keep if you can explain it to a child at a market table." The board chair swallowed and spoke. "I can explain some," she said. "I cannot explain most." The miner snorted. "I can explain all," he said, thank you to himself, and sent us the bill. The poet wrote a line into the civic window, "Gratitude is not a handcuff. It is a hand that opens." Rochal's eyes grew remote the way a man's eyes grow when he is deciding whether to play the only card left in a thin deck and accept the scorn that comes with it. He lifted his chin and said, "Commander Keats, your mirror is a weapon." "It is a window," I said. "And windows break," he said. "We teach windows to bend by making them from law." The last thing before the cut came not from Rochal, but from us. The lore stamp which Alethea insisted we carry like a prayer, when we were unsure, slid into the civic window as a small note in a corner, easy to miss, impossible to forget. This saintship teaches by numbers and remembers by ledgers, never by collars. Imani smiled when she saw it. Nora's laugh came back warm like a stove catching. Rook touched his slate like a talisman. We were about to settle the ring balance in a single motion that everyone would read and many would resent. And Alethea whispered in my ear, with a voice that tasted like cool water and wire. "Commander," she said, "the prefect has ordered his choir to darken their validators for a breath. He means to reset. When they come back up, they will claim the mirror failed. If we time it wrong, we lose the civic thread. If we time it right, we can write 'confirmed' over every line they said was sent." I watched the beacon's edge sharpen so hard, it looked like it would cut space. The air in the bay held still as a held note. Below the rings turned stubborn and patient, and I could smell bread somewhere, even though no bread was baking on our ship. I felt the deck thrumming like a promise, and I spoke with the weight the corridor had given me. "Alethea," I said when they darken, count. We count in the quiet because that's when the liars breathe. They darkened like a flock turning in unison, validators going dead still for a single artificial breath. The corridor's weight changed from a hum to a drawn string, tight and singing in bone. I felt it in my teeth more than on my skin. Alethea's processors leaned into the gap, like a reader sliding a hand between pages. In the quiet, the sums stepped out naked, and our ship caught them. We measured in bread, not incense. Now Alethea whispered, and numbers clicked where doctrine had tried to blur. Receipts rolled into the civic window like small, irrefutable stones. A levy marked blessing. An hour marked obedience. A repair billed as worship. The validator lights returned with a shiver too late to unwrite the captured truth. On the widow's wrist, the collar display flashed, then went dark, then returned with a blinking prompt it had never shown before, balance available for return. Rochal's eyes hooded. "Tricks," he said softly. "Lapses in piety disguised as arithmetic." Rook didn't raise his voice. Facts, he replied, presented under witness and weighed in an open room. Your threats read like prices with the labels scraped off. The board conferred across a silence heavy as a vice. The miner scratched his jaw. The nurse looked at her strap, then at the child whose teacher stood steady behind him. The poet read the list of exemptions twice and did not blink the second time. The freight scheduler tapped 3 entries with a finger, hardened by cold storage doors. The chair spoke. Prefect Rochal, she said, we find concealment and self-dealing. We find levies assessed before objection. We find harm counted as gratitude. Under the corridor, we suspend your doctrine within beacon reach until a full tribunal. We order settlement now in public. Rochal's smile didn't move, but the skin around it did. You usurp mercy with small minds. Small minds count carefully, the miner said. We stood between their habits and the door. Settlement began with a hiss in our pipes as Alethea throttled the account mirror into a steady, low flow. Credits moved. Collars loosened. Tagged exemptions returned with a simple annotation. Explain this to your mother. The colony didn't cheer. They exhaled like a collective chest had been holding too long. A baker's 3 sacks reappeared itemized and dated, then pinged to his ledger with a chime that made him clap a flowery palm over his mouth. A ferry pilot's overtime unhooked from gratitude weight and moved into work paid a category that looked almost obscene after so long under other names. The widow's strap offered an option release to memorial or convert to plain band. She chose plain and slid it back on no light, no tone. We didn't ask for favor, we asked for a receipt. Rochal signaled his escorts. Their ceremonial frigates shifted like dancers who had dropped their props. The corridor tightened as their legal shield pushed back, scent rising and thinning in the same breath. Commander Keats, he said, velvet over iron, invoke desertion and be done. Protection withdrawn. Harmony restored. Rook leaned nearer to the pickup. Under witness, the word restored is a lie. You threaten retaliation against inquiry. That's contempt. Imani's board flashed a mauve I'd only seen twice. They're priming a soft shield collapse, she said. They want the corridor to sag and look like our fault. Alethea's halo hardened to quartz. I can brace, she said, but it will cost reserves. Spend them, I said. We don't teach the rings how to count and then drop the abacus. We paid first, so no one else had to. Before the next push, we went back to the colony. A barber stood in a shop with 3 chairs and 1 mirror hand hovering near scissors he couldn't afford to sharpen as often as he liked. I cut hair slower, he said. I sent the difference to the doctrine. I thought patience was piety. A janitor stood beside a school drain he had unclogged with a coat hanger and hot water. They billed my time as gratitude, he said. My boy's homework smells like bleach. A shuttle grandmother held a plastic flower and a real child. I will not kneel to numbers that do not say my name. A gardener spread mint on a tray and laughed once. I grew this because air credits tick, she said. Now it just smells like mint. A courier showed a scar on his wrist where a strap had rubbed raw during a long week. I was told that was holy ache. We bent the beam without breaking the glass. Commander Alethea said, I have a compact ready if you choose. The Cross-Gratitude Compact. 3 neutral fleets and 6 independent stations will sign affidavits to share hazard within 1 jump for 90 days contingent on an open ledger. It turns desertion into abandonment. Rook's eyes warmed in a way that made him look 10 years younger. Abandonment, he said. That's a word a clerk can stamp. Show it, I said. The civic window split. Captains and stewards from ships that owed us nothing appeared a freighter with a hull patched in 3 tones, a med barge with a green cross fading on its skin, a tug pilot with grease under nails and a laugh that promised help without flattery. They spoke brief and plain. We don't like collars, the tug pilot said. We like lanes. We'll soften the corner if you fall. We share scans, the med barge captain added. We don't invoice grief. We do it because we're here too, the freighter said. Not because it smells nice. We turned desertion into a crime with room for witness. Rochelle looked past us at his choir, the glittering cleric with the seal that had oiled exemptions. Alethea slid a quiet analysis into my ear like a friend's aside. If he accepts abandonment, he must either leave openly or pretend to stay and sulk. Neither keeps the doctrine whole. He knows, I said. He knew. Commander Keats, he said, your compact cheapens protection. Your protection was a toll booth with a hymn, I said. Mercy cannot be priced by those who receive it, he replied. Then it is not offered, Rook said. It is imposed. We did not ask permission to breathe. It could have broken there. It could have slid into heat and iron, and the comfort some carry for simple fights. The board held it on the line with a decision read in a voice that would have sounded the same announcing a birth weight. By quorum under corridor, the chair said we forbid any tightening of collars within beacon range during settlement and compact. We order full chain disclosure within 1 day by beacon clock. We require restitution of exemptions used by office holders. We mark the doctrine as non-operational pending tribunal. Rochelle's smile finally cracked. A hairline only, but a crack tells you more than a grin ever will. He flicked 2 fingers. His escorts dimmed their choir to embers and drifted a careful meter back. Withdraw under protest, he said. Noted Rook replied. His slate glowed briefly, a line added to a page someone would read long after we slept. Silence took a breath and handed it to us. We didn't win the sky, we won the room. Alethea let the mirror rest on its own feet and turned processors toward the thing we had kept from burning. Commander, she said privately, I located the tagger. The valve sabotage came from one of ours. Spokesperson Wasim copied doctrine glyphs to misdirect. He reports guilt and claims motive. His cousin died under a collar. He wanted the mirror to scorch. Understood, I said, and it came out heavier than I meant. Nora's voice slid through with sweat and laughter. He's in the crawl beside me, Commander. He looks like a man who knows a stove can burn and wanted to touch anyway. Bring him, I said. He'll face inquiry with us. We didn't parade him. We didn't hide him. He stood behind me during the next exchange, jaw-clenched eyes on the civic window where a widow's strap lay still. When the board asked whether we would pursue charges, I answered the only way that kept the ship's spine straight. Internal discipline, public record, I said. We don't excuse danger because we like the reason. We cut our own knots before we touch theirs. Costs arrived like bills tossed through a diner hatch. Alethea posted them where anyone could see because balance is a page, not a feeling. 3 stress microfractures in a forward rib. We patched 1, we marked 2 for yard. Reserve heat bled into the bleed ring. 3 days of austerity to rebuild without stealing from gardens. Nora burned her left forearm on a valve wheel. She laced the bandage with a mechanic's joke and told no one to make a fuss. Wasim's fingertips blistered from a crawl, where the air ran thin. He held ice and answers. I signed my name beside each line. The colony posted costs of their own. A grocer's shelves sat thin because transport paused during inquiry. She wrote, I can wait 2 days. I will not wait 2 years. A school turned heaters low and gave children sweaters sewn from old harness covers. The teacher wrote, warm enough to count. A pipe crew worked night shift to keep ring flow steady during bleed. They wrote, we are tired, not tragic. We said what it cost out loud. The tribunal could have waited, but the beacon does not always respect schedules. The public inquiry had made a hole in the doctrine wide enough to drive the next hearing through, while settlement continued. Star Court Node 12 signaled a time. We had 40 minutes to make closing argument before the corridor folded into a formal chamber. Rook prepared 3 piles, claimed mercy, priced debt, unpaid harm. He asked for nothing fancy. He asked for the thing that turns fight into rule. Precedent, he said. Durable enough to live past us. Alethea laughed quietly, the first sound like wind I'd heard from her all day. You always carry a chisel, Rook. He smiled a half-inch. Law is carving. We left a mark they can't sand out. Civilian voices led that last set piece. We didn't put a uniform first. We put a baker, a janitor, a ferry pilot, a widow, a teacher, a miner. They didn't cry. They didn't shout. They didn't say, please. They said sentences you could use to build a shelf. I can buy yeast without a hymn, the baker said. I can clean a floor without a tithe, the janitor said. I can fly because I can fly, the pilot said. I can mourn without a meter, the widow said. I can teach with lights on, the teacher said. I can dig without feeling like someone's counting my breath, the miner said. We let ordinary sentences do extraordinary work. Rochelle made one more play because men like him do not stop at obvious walls. He pulled an old clause from a doctrine shelf and blew dust in our eyes. Gratitude pledged under fear remains gratitude, he quoted. Fear is a normal attribute of the defended. Rook didn't look at him. He looked at the board. Fear may be normal, he said. It is not a currency. The chair nodded once. We agree. Alethea sent me a private image unbidden and perfect, the court beacon's heart, a core that ran just above flesh temperature cycling, from white to soft amber, when a decision took hold. I tucked it behind my ribs and spoke our ask. We want a lock, I said. We want callers disallowed as instruments of gratitude. We want payment before objection forbidden. We want chain publication universal and simple. We want the corridor of law recognized as a place where threats weigh more than perfume. We were not asking for favor, we were building flooring. The tribunal read quickly, because the room had already done most of the work. It took 9 minutes to formalize what rings and hands already knew. The decision arrived like a winter sun through dirty glass, cold, clean enough to see by. Under public ledger authority of Node 12, gratitude as debt requires opt-in after relief is delivered and verified by independent measure. Any demand before objection is unlawful. Callers are outlawed as instruments of civil account. All chains that assess community obligation must be published in plain. The beacon corridor is recognized as lawful passage for inquiry. Violations invite mirror return with receipts visible. The poet on the board exhaled the first sound like joy I'd heard from her small and dangerous and wholly human. The nurse touched her strap and smiled like a woman who had finished a shift without cutting corners. The miner grinned with his whole face. Rochelle inclined his head as if he received a medal. We will appeal, he said. Of course, Rook said. Appeals love sunlight. We did not change his mind. We changed the room he operates in. The escorts edged back another meter, then another, then turned like fish, told suddenly they were in a river and not a bowl. The choir dimmed to a polite wash. The cleric with the seal swallowed once and looked down. Ship to ship, they said nothing, which said more than their doctrine ever had. Commander Alethea whispered, Would you like a line on the ledger? 2, I said. One that speaks to a widow and one that scares a miser, she obliged. The public page updated where all could see thick letters in a font older than our ship and younger than our blood. Precedent lock collars revoked as accounting instruments within Star Court Node 12's reach. Payment before objection outlawed. Open chain publication compulsory. Corridor of law status confirmed. Enforceable by beacon mirror with receipts posted. A second line small and sharp exemptions granted by office holders are debts to the public until explained plainly. We made the rules visible so they couldn't be sold wholesale. I should have stopped then. We had the lock. We had settlement. We had a compact that turned threats into fines. But something sat wrong behind my tongue, a taste like copper and old coffee. I looked at Rochelle and saw a man who could survive this by eating his own certainty until hunger wore a new name. Prefect, I said, you may appeal. You may repair. You may stalk other rings with cleaner clothes. But know this, the next time you call mercy a product, you will have to show warranty. He smiled, and in it I saw a boy who had once believed that giving was a way to be seen. Commander Keats, he said you would have made an excellent Ilvari. I'm trying to make an excellent human, I said. We set the price of dignity at 0 and refused a discount. We powered down the corridor, edge by edge, until the room felt like a room again, and not a drawn bow. Nora returned to the bay smelling like hot metal and triumph. Wasim stood with his hands wrapped and his shame visible without being performative. Imani let herself sag in the chair like a dancer whose partner had finally stopped testing her balance. Rook sat on the edge of my console and looked at nothing for a long time, which in his case means everything. Alethea made the lights kinder. Commander, she said, may I confess a calculus? You may, I said. I projected higher certainty from burn than from balance, she said. I was wrong about the shape of certainty. The corridor altered variables that my models call sentiment, and your people call will. I will learn it. I will weigh it earlier next time. You did fine, Nora said, half gruff, half soft. Better than fine, Imani added. You kept the line where we could see it. Rook lifted his slate. She became a school, he murmured. Not a sword. We built a tool that doesn't require blood to prove it works. We stayed on station through the slow hours that make victories feel cheap because they come with mopping. Settlement entries trickled and then thinned. The board dismissed themselves with nods and tired kindnesses. The baker closed his shop and opened it again because sometimes you need to bake in the middle of a day to understand that days keep happening. The ferry pilot slept in his chair and snored quietly with one hand still on the yoke. In a ring corridor, the child with the teacher walked toward the pump and then kept walking to see what it felt like not to be charged for arriving. His steps echoed like small hammers in a house being framed. We let them write their names on their own bills. Costs found us again before we left, as if the ledger wanted one more reminder that every balance makes a dent. A fuel cell ran hot. We throttled it and sent a note to our future. A sensor plate failed from the noise of too many lies trying to sing at once. We replaced it with one rated for honesty. My voice cracked when I thanked the board. I drank water, and it tasted like water, no doctrine in it at all. Alethea dimmed her hilo to a quiet ring. Commander, she asked, do you want to mark the beacon? Yes, I said. I want to leave something less pretty than a plaque. Together, we authored a marginal note on the public page, a simple tag anyone could paste into their own proceeds when a similar doctrine arrived with similar perfume. If your mercy requires a collar, it is commerce. If your gratitude requires a gag, it is theft. We wrote a sentence that could survive a century. Rochal's ships turned to go. They did not broadcast farewell. Their choir did not hum. They moved with the speed of a plan adjusting. The cleric hid his seal in a sleeve and stared at the place where the corridor had been, as if absence could be convinced to become presence again. Let them go, Rook said softly. Make room for boring work. Boring work is where dignity lives, Imani said. Nora cracked a heel against the railing, twice an old habit for luck. Boring work pays, she said. Wasim cleared his throat. Commander, he said, I did wrong. You did, I said, and didn't sand it down. You'll sit with Rook and write it into the record. You'll repair what you bent. You'll also take letters from families those callers marked. You'll answer every one. He nodded. Yes. We clean our own floor before we knock on anyone else's door. When we finally pivoted to leave the beacon cooled from hard white to human amber. The rings rolled slow and beautiful under a sky so black you could smell cold if you believed in such senses. On the market line, someone roasted something sweet. The smell drifted up a camera line and made the bay feel like a kitchen for a heartbeat. Alethea put a last question in my ear. Commander, she said, soft as lint, what will they do with their collars now? Make them into something else, I said. Dog leashes, belts, picture frames, Ribbons for funerals. Toys for children who shouldn't have to learn the sound they used to make. Good, she said. We left them with a room they owned. Public ledger entry, blinking confirmed. I spoke into the ship and the window and the law, a message meant to fold small and fit behind the ribs of whoever needed it later. We did something almost soft in a place that prefers noise. We carried costs where we had to and posted them when we could. We made a room and we filled it with counting you can teach a child, and with mercy you can recognize without incense. If they come again with new callers and better songs, we will meet them with the same thing, a pen, a light, a window, a promise we can afford. We lit the beacon. We kept the weight. We walked away with every name still ours.